Get out of my way, old man. The words cut through the salt-thick air of Naval Station Norfolk like a blade. Rear Admiral Thompson's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that comes from 2 stars on your collar and 25 years of commanding men at sea. He wasn't speaking to an enemy. He was speaking to a security guard, an old man in a faded maroon polo shirt with frayed shoulders, khaki pants that had seen better days, and a Navy veteran ball cap so worn the stitching was coming loose. The guard stood at the VIP checkpoint, clipboard in hand, his weathered face calm as stone. He was maybe 78, maybe older. His hair was silver white, cut military short. His back was straight, unnaturally straight for a man his age, and his pale blue eyes held something the Admiral didn't recognize. Something cold, something patient. "Sir, protocol requires visual confirmation from the command post," the old man said quietly. His voice was low, steady, like distant thunder. "It'll only take a moment." Around them, hundreds of sailors in dress whites gathered for the fleet's annual commissioning ceremony. Families clutched miniature American flags. Children sat on their father's shoulders. But here, at this checkpoint, the world had gone silent. Everyone nearby had stopped talking. They were watching. The Admiral's jaw tightened, his face flushed red. "This is General Miller," he snapped. "His credentials are unimpeachable. Your scanner is broken. Let him pass." The old guard didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there waiting for the radio confirmation. And that's when the Admiral made his first mistake. He reached out and grabbed the old man's shoulder. His name was Robert Hartman, though nobody on the base called him that. To the younger guards, he was just old Bob. To the sailors passing through his checkpoint every morning, he was the quiet guy who always smiled and said, "Stay safe out there." To the officers who barely noticed him, he was invisible. He was 78 years old and had been working security at Naval Station Norfolk for 5 years. He arrived every morning at 5:30, a full hour before his shift started. His locker was immaculate, organized with military precision. His lunch was the same every day, a turkey sandwich, an apple, and black coffee in a dented thermos. He never joined the break room conversations. While other guards talked about football, Bob sat alone reading a worn paperback with no cover. On his right wrist, he wore a simple silver bracelet, tarnished with age. Nobody ever asked about it. Nobody ever asked about him at all. But if you looked closely, really looked, you'd see things that didn't quite fit. The way he stood. His back was ramrod straight, shoulders squared, even after a 12-hour shift. When he walked his patrol, despite the slight limp in his left leg, his steps were rhythmic, measured, precise, like a march. And his eyes, they were pale blue, the color of winter ice, and they never stopped moving. He'd scan a crowd in 3 seconds flat, cataloging faces, identifying threats, noting exits. A few of the older chiefs, the ones who'd seen real combat, they noticed, and it made them uneasy. Bob had scars. You could see them if you looked close enough. A thick, ropey line on his forearm, usually hidden under his sleeve. Another on his neck, just below his collar. The kind of scars that didn't come from accidents. The kind that came from war. But nobody asked, and Bob never told. Until today, his past was a secret he carried alone, buried deep beneath the surface of a simple, unremarkable life. Rear Admiral David Thompson was not a patient man. At 48 years old, he'd clawed his way up through sheer determination and an iron belief in the chain of command. In his world, there were 2 types of people, those who wore the uniform and those who didn't matter. Bob Hartman fell firmly into the second category. Their first clash happened a month earlier during a security briefing for a visiting dignitary. The conference room was packed with officers and security personnel. The proposed motorcade route was displayed on screen. Then Bob raised his hand. "Sir," he'd said calmly, "the proposed route has a blind spot between the Armory and Hangar 4. The surveillance tower has a restricted line of sight for nearly 200 yards. Admiral Thompson had looked down at him like a man staring at an insect. "Let's leave the strategic analysis to the people who actually wear the uniform, shall we?" Thompson had said. A few officers chuckled nervously. Bob simply nodded and sat down. The next day, the route was quietly changed, but Thompson never knew. The second incident was more personal. 2 weeks ago, Thompson had been jogging when he saw Bob crouched by the fence, examining the wire. "Everything to your satisfaction, contractor?" Thompson had asked sarcastically. "The wire is showing corrosion, sir. Could be a breach point." Thompson scoffed. "I've been running this perimeter for 10 years. The fence is fine. Stop inventing problems." The next morning, a work order was submitted. The fence was fixed. But the Admiral's contempt only deepened, and that brought them to today. The commissioning ceremony was the culmination of Thompson's career. Everything had to be perfect. And then this old man had forced him to wait, had embarrassed him in front of General Miller. The Admiral was done. As the ceremony prepared to begin, Navy SEALs arrived, just back from deployment. Their leader, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, moved through the crowd with lethal grace. Thompson strode over to Bob, who was directing foot traffic. He stopped directly in front of him, forcing the old man to halt. The crowd fell silent. "I thought I made myself clear," Thompson began, his voice carrying. "Your job is to be seen and not heard. You are a civilian, a temporary employee." Bob met his gaze calmly. "My apologies, Admiral." His calm only made Thompson angrier. "I give the orders here. Your presence on this pier is at my discretion, and right now you are a liability." He leaned in closer. "I want you off this pier. Now, report to your supervisor. Maybe it's time you retire to that nursing home where you belong." The crowd gasped. Bob simply nodded and turned to walk away. As Bob walked away, the wind off the harbor gusted across the pier. It caught the sleeve of his maroon polo shirt, pushing it up past his elbow. A chief petty officer standing nearby saw it first. Snaking up Bob's forearm was a thick, jagged scar, a chaotic lattice of puckered skin. It wasn't surgery, it was shrapnel, metal tearing through flesh at high velocity. The chief had seen wounds like that in Fallujah. He knew what they meant. Bob quickly pulled his sleeve down. As he passed a Marine gunnery sergeant, his collar shifted. The gunny saw the edge of a tattoo on Bob's upper back. Black ink, sharp and predatory. An eagle's talon, the mark of an old SEAL team. Lieutenant Commander Jackson watched Bob walk away. He watched the way the old man moved, the economy of motion, the straightness of his spine, the discipline in every step. Jackson leaned to his Master Chief. "Look at that man, the way he walks." The Master Chief studied Bob, then shook his head slowly. Jackson's jaw tightened. He whispered a single word. "Ghost." The Master Chief's head snapped around, eyes wide, and then the world exploded into chaos. A sharp metallic screech ripped through the air. Every head turned. Near the main stage, a massive lighting rig mounted on a hydraulic lift had suffered catastrophic failure. The entire structure, weighing several tons, lurched violently. The hydraulic arm buckled, and then the rig began to topple, directly toward the bleachers, toward 50 people, toward children. Panic erupted. Screams tore through the crowd. Parents grabbed their children. There was no time. The rig was falling fast, a multi-ton guillotine of metal arcing through the air. Admiral Thompson froze. Officers around him stood paralyzed, mouths open, bodies locked by shock. Robert Hartman transformed. His voice exploded across the pier, a roar of absolute command that cut through the screams like a cannon shot. "Brace and cover!" It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order, delivered with such raw authority that people obeyed instantly. Families dropped to the ground. Sailors threw themselves over their children. Bob moved. The limp was gone. He ran parallel to the falling rig, eyes calculating its trajectory with cold precision. "VIPs against the bulkhead, stage right," he bellowed, pointing toward the steel wall of a nearby ship. He saw two young sailors frozen in terror. He pointed directly at them. "You two, get the children clear, now! Use that maintenance corridor." His finger jabbed toward a passage nobody else had noticed. The sailors jolted, training took over. They began herding families toward the corridor. Bob kept commanding. "Families with strollers, move left. Medical personnel, stand by at rally point, bravo!" His voice didn't waver. It was the voice of a man who had done this before, who had commanded men under fire, who had made life and death decisions in the span of a heartbeat. The lighting rig hit the ground with a deafening crash. Metal screamed, glass exploded. The bleachers buckled under the impact. But the section was empty. Every single person had cleared the impact zone. Mothers clutched their children, gasping. Sailors stared at the wreckage, faces pale. The entire evacuation had taken 5 seconds. 5 seconds. And in those 5 seconds, Bob had assessed the threat, issued clear commands, coordinated an evacuation, and saved at least 50 lives. The pier fell silent. The only sound was distant seagulls and ragged breathing. Every single person, from the rawest recruit to Admiral Thompson himself, stood frozen in stunned disbelief, staring at the old man in the faded maroon polo shirt. Lieutenant Commander Jackson didn't hesitate. He moved through the stunned crowd with purpose. He walked past junior officers, past decorated captains, past Admiral Thompson, who still stood frozen. Jackson stopped 3 feet in front of Bob. He didn't speak. He just looked at him, his gaze filled with profound respect. Admiral Thompson finally found his voice. "What in God's name is going on, Commander? Who is this man?" Jackson never took his eyes off Bob. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried across the silent pier. "Admiral, I think you know who he is. You just don't know what he is." He turned slightly to face Thompson. "Sir, with all due respect, you're addressing Master Chief Robert Hartman, United States Navy SEALs, retired." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Master Chief? A SEAL?" Jackson let the title sink in, then continued, his voice dropping lower. "Call sign, Ghost." The name hung in the air like smoke. For the operators in the crowd, that name was mythology. Master Chief Ghost Hartman was a legend whispered about in training courses, in bars overseas, in quiet moments before dangerous missions. Master Chief Hartman served 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 in Desert Storm, 1 in Afghanistan at 68, because nobody else could do the job. He paused. He is a Navy Cross recipient, Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars with Valor, Purple Heart with 2 clusters. In 1972, he completed a solo extraction of 12 American hostages from a prison camp outside Hanoi. Alone, saying, through 100 miles of hostile jungle. The North Vietnamese put a $100,000 bounty on his head. They called him the Ghost because he would strike without warning and vanish without a trace. The crowd was dead silent. He trained half the SEAL instructors at Buds today. He wrote the manual on urban combat we still use. He pioneered tactics that saved countless lives in Fallujah and Ramadi. Jackson's voice grew thick. That scar on his arm, shrapnel from saving a downed pilot in the Mekong Delta. The limp took a bullet for his team in Fallujah at 68 years old. He took a breath. When Master Chief Hartman retired, the entire SEAL community stood at attention for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of silence to honor a man who gave 50 years of his life to this nation. Jackson's voice broke slightly. And today, an admiral publicly humiliated him because he didn't recognize a hero standing right in front of him. The silence that followed was crushing. Lieutenant Commander Jackson's back went ramrod straight. He brought his hand up in a salute so sharp it seemed to cut the air. It was not the perfunctory salute given to a superior officer. It was the salute a warrior gives to a living legend. "Master Chief, it is an honor, sir." Instantly, Jackson's entire SEAL team snapped to attention, hands cracking against their brows in perfect respect. Then the Marine Gunnery Sergeant saluted. The Chief Petty Officer saluted. An Army Colonel saluted. Air Force veterans came to attention. And then the wave spread. From the youngest seamen to the grizzled Command Master Chiefs, hundreds of sailors brought their hands to their brows, all saluting the quiet old man in the maroon polo shirt. Admiral Thompson was the last to move. He stood paralyzed, shame washing over him like a physical force. Slowly, as if lifting a great weight, he raised his hand to his brow. His salute was stiff, formal, and held far longer than protocol required. Bob looked at the sea of salutes. Emotion flickered across his face, not pride, something quieter, something sad. He gave Jackson a single nod. Then he turned to Admiral Thompson. "We all have a job to do, sir," Bob said quietly. "Today, mine was this checkpoint. Please see to your guests." He walked to the bleachers and began helping first responders, his focus immediately re-engaging. Admiral Thompson stood alone, surrounded by hundreds of people, feeling more isolated than ever in his life. The story spread across Naval Station Norfolk like wildfire. It became a lesson whispered in briefing rooms. A story about the unassuming security guard who was once a legend. A reminder that the greatest heroes are often the ones who seek no glory. If this story moved you, leave a comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of silent heroes who walk among us. These stories of sacrifice and courage deserve to be remembered. Hit that like button to honor all our veterans.